Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Phil Hoffman, and welcome to this week's episode of Pause. And in this week, we'll be talking to the folks from the Kaysinger Basin Area Regional Planning Commission. That's coming up next on Pause. And welcome to Pause. I'm your host, Dr. Phil Hoffman, and we're pleased today to join our guests from the Kaysinger Basin Area Regional Planning Commission. And those guests include Elizabeth Ogg, who is the executive director there, also Cassie Sanders, and our next to me here is Kristi Kelley. And let's start a little bit, Kristi, talking about what the upcoming event is. You have a sort of a business conference that's coming up fairly soon. Talk a little bit about the history of that and how that came to be.
Well, let me start off with our organization, because it's we have kind of a long name. It's a regional planning commission. In 1968, 19 regional planning commissions were set up in the state of Missouri. So we serve 7 counties. We're an economic development district that works with city and county leaders to help find funding for projects in areas like transportation, or if they're looking for a community facility, we try to find the funding for that.
And so that's been something that's been ongoing for many, many years, right? Give us an example of some of the folks that you have worked with in the past, or some of the projects that have...
Well, we have 55 communities within our 7 counties, and we, a good example is some of the sewer projects we've helped our communities find funding for, because it's difficult to take on $1 million project when there's not funds available for that. So we help the city or the county, whichever is in need, go through the application and work with the state to secure that funding for them.
And so that's something that probably these individual communities couldn't necessarily afford to even hire somebody to help them, right?
Right. And the majority of our region is rural, so the tax revenue is not there to support infrastructure and things like that. So we really do play a major role in helping these communities.
Now, Elizabeth, as the executive director of the commission, maybe you could expand a little bit on that and talk a little bit about just the sort of things that you do when you work with these communities, and how does a need get identified? Usually, do the cities come to you, or is it something that you guys are working on as a region? How does that work?
It's actually a little bit of both. It depends on the funding mechanism that we're using. Like when you're using community development block grants through the state, we know it's once a year, so we'll plan for the whole year. We'll figure out what the needs are at that point. But sometimes the community just says, like she said, oh, we need a new sewer system, and we have no clue how to pay for it. That's when we start trying to use all of our contacts and figure out how to help them out. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis.
What's the biggest challenge usually for these communities? Is it the lack of population, lack of taxes, or is it maybe a federal mandate that says you have to do this, and so they're just trying to react to it, or is it a mix of both of those?
It really depends. Sometimes you get communities that are being proactive, and so they know they want to update the systems or do something before they kind of stop working or whatever the situation. But sometimes it does come where they're mandated to do updates, and so that's where we come in and help. But we also create plans. We have hazard mitigation plans, disaster-related land use plans, and stuff like that, where the planning in advance helps us keep track of what needs to be done in communities.
And it's probably also a challenge too, just because if you have 55 communities in your region, there's just a lot of people, a lot of places. I imagine a lot of travel for you, right?
All of us.
So how do you knit together? How does that happen?
Well, we have a great staff, and everybody has kind of their own job. Kristi does our, I'm drawing us like.
Well, I take care of our solid waste management district. I also take care of brownfields, which is helping to get commercial properties to sell and to get those assessed. We've got funding for that. I help with our community development block grants, which whenever our community has a need for a community facility or a demolition project or what have you, we'll write those applications for them. So we wear many hats.
So Elizabeth, let's talk a little bit about, that's a complex kind of procedure to bring all those groups together, and probably a lot of legal ramifications, code ramifications, all sorts of things. Who do you work with, and how do you bring all those people together so that you can effectively move these projects forward?
Well, the employees we have at Kaysinger, everybody has their own specialization. So if you're going to do a community development block grant like you will go to Ashley, one of our employees, and she knows the ins and outs, the ups and downs of the entire program, and she's going to be able to walk you through. She's going to know who she has to talk to at the state level and what the communities each need to do to get that grant application done, and then she'll help you administer the grant if you get funded. So it just depends on what you're asking for, but we have an employee for basically everything we do at the office.
Which is great. You think of all these communities, as we said before, it's hard for small communities to have staffs like this. Each community have their own staff. It would be really challenging financially for people to do that. So that's the service you guys provide.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit, Cassie, I apologize we haven't talked to you yet, but we mentioned earlier that there's a business conference coming up. Let's talk about that. When is it, and sort of what's going to happen at it?
So in September of 2015, we were given a grant by USDA to fund a business conference, which we are going to hold on May 12th of 2016. There will be 2 all-inclusive general sessions during the day, and then we'll offer 6 breakout sessions as well. It will be an all-day event. We will provide lunch. We are offering to the communities, or to the businesses in the communities, to have an exhibitor's booth, also to have an opportunity to market their business and also interact with all of the bankers and other businesses in the community that would help the small and emerging businesses in the rural areas.
So when you think about this, what was the genesis of this idea? Was there a grant application and you responded to that? Or was this something that your businesses had told you, hey, this would be great if you could do this?
We have actually held 5 in the past. This will be our 6th business conference that Kaysinger has. It used to be annual, and then we hit a stint where we didn't have it for a couple of years. And so we're bringing this back this year. Hopefully it will be annual every year. USDA came up with the grant, the RBEG grant, and we applied for it and we were given the grant.
So then when you look at the day, you mentioned there's breakfast or lunch rather, and that's great.
There will be breakfast also.
I remember that. Okay, now breakfast too, so that's also great. But give us an idea of some of the sessions that folks might see or want to participate in.
So there will be a session on how to use and write a business plan, expanding and growing your business for the already existing businesses. So we're focusing on both the startup and the existing. Successful marketing, how to create a website and use social media. I think that's very big for a lot of the businesses to be able to market themselves. We're also going to have, USDA will be there to show the different loan availabilities that they have and also the grants that they have available and key factors to success.
So it's a comprehensive kind of day. If I would think probably the worst thing for me as a potential business owner is I might want to go to all of the concurrent sessions all at once, right?
The best part about our conference, we're actually going to offer everything throughout the whole day on a USB drive that everyone who registers to attend will receive. So they will take all of that information home with them.
That's great. So you can't miss anything. There's literally no reason to miss it.
No, all of the PowerPoint presentations will be on the USB drive. And so if you're not able to attend one breakout session, you can definitely watch it at home. And if you're looking back, you'll have it in the future too.
Well, I know one of the things when you put together a grant like this is they always ask you what's the outcome going to be, what do you hope to accomplish with this. So what kind of things do you have in mind that would be outcomes from the day?
We're hoping some job creation, that businesses will be able to expand and they'll look at other funding options that they might not have had in the past. And we've partnered with SBA as well. We're going to be working with several banks to have them there. That way they can offer funding options and just for their expansion. And hopefully new businesses will come to the area as well. It is going to service all 7 of our counties.
So you guys have 55 communities in 7 counties, and you have a day-long event that everybody's going to come to. When you look at all the people that are coming to this from all these different areas and all the participation that you're hoping for, right?
Yes.
In the course of the day. What's the idea for you in terms of numbers of people that you're hoping to reach with this?
We're hoping to have around 200 people attend. Business owners, we understand that they're all busy.
Right.
That's our hope with offering the USB drive, that even though they may not be able to spend the full day there, they can still take away all of the important factors of this conference.
So when you look at the process of doing this and putting this all together, Kristi, obviously you do a lot of the work with actually helping, it sounds like, communities implement solutions, right?
Right.
So how do we get from this discussion stage where you're talking about, well, maybe I'd like to have a business or maybe I'd like to grow my business, and then you obviously come in where it's time to like, okay, let's make this happen. What's the tricky part in doing that for most businesses? Is there a place where a lot of cities or a lot of businesses get tripped up in moving from idea to execution?
Certainly. Especially with establishing a business, of course, we have to have our communities and our counties ready for those infrastructure-wise, or can we accommodate them? Can we accommodate their wants and their needs? So there's a lot that goes into that.
And you mentioned earlier, you're talking about brownfields and things like that. It's, I would imagine, difficult in a more rural county to have funding to even set up buildable lots for businesses, right? Is that a challenge as well?
It is, and you also run into older, dilapidated structures, and especially when a once flourishing community is not flourishing anymore, and there's a lot of just not so pretty buildings around. Those are issues that need to be addressed.
And so does that become part of the portfolio of things that you work on? Do you also work on either remediation on those buildings or maybe sometimes just getting rid of them entirely?
We work with the community from start to finish on finding solutions and funding for those solutions. So yeah.
That's a big job. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. So Elizabeth, when you think about all of these things, obviously the business conference, while important, is only one thing that you're going to do over the course of the year. Can you give us kind of the full picture of what the Regional Planning Commission does, all the different activities that happen over the course of the year?
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's a
a
lot.
big question.
Right.
Okay, as I said, we do a lot of grant writing and administering grants. It's great to be able to, these communities, they don't have the time and the staff to do a lot of this stuff themselves. So it's great that if they do get a grant, we're there to assist them through the process to make sure everything's getting done. Because especially if you're getting a grant from the state or from the federal level, there's a lot that they ask for. So they don't need to worry about that. That's what we're there for. We also, like we discussed earlier, we have hazard mitigation plans, and we just recently finished disaster-related land use plans. We have a great regional planner that's working on all that, and every county has to have a hazard mitigation plan. So we're going to be updating 3 or 4 in the next year, so she's going to be very busy doing that. That's kind of a few of our projects. We also, like Kristi said, we do transportation planning. Every year we have to do project updates, and we're constantly working on with MoDOT to do that. We have a few other, we have random bits and pieces. We'll have stuff that'll come up from the state level where they'll ask us to do stuff. And we also have projects that come up just out of the blue where we'll help a community out. If somebody, recently we had a county say, we know what our needs are, we just don't know what to do with them. So we're going to go and we're going to put those needs together and figure out how to implement them and basically help them. So you can implement it by doing this, and this is the funding mechanism, this is how we can assist you. So we kind of we do a little bit of everything, but that's what we're there for.
Now, when you talk about the planning for hazards and emergencies and things like that, obviously that's not your sole area. So I imagine you collaborate with lots of other departments and lots of other entities.
Yeah, with anything when it comes to emergency, we generally work with FEMA and SEMA because every once in a while, like in 2015, we were a designated disaster area because of all the flooding, and so there's funding that comes out from that. Sometimes we get to go and assist with that and with the clean. And what we want to do is kind of help people get to the point where if you do have a disaster, you know what to do when it happens, instead of kind of being proactive instead of reactive. And so we work with SEMA and FEMA to do stuff like that.
And certainly having the plan in place, you hope you never need to use it.
Exactly.
But have you been in the position where you've had to actually enact one of those plans recently? Is that something?
No.
Not yet?
No, I
That's
hope I
good.
never have to.
Right, absolutely.
But no, we're very fortunate that we haven't been in that kind of situation yet in our region. So.
What kind of scenarios, when you're doing the emergency planning, what kind of scenarios are you preparing for? Can you give us an idea?
There's a lot, mostly flooding actually is the big one in our area. And that's really what of course you randomly will get the tornado warnings. So a big one actually is making sure there's tornado sirens. Because a lot of these small towns in our area, they don't even have a siren. So, and if you live in certain areas, you don't have cell phone service. So how are you supposed to know if something's going wrong? So that's why we did, with the disaster-related land use plan, that's part of that was letting you know, you need a siren for your safety. And it tells you where you need to go if there is an emergency and who you need to contact. So we're trying to, I think with everything that's been going on in the most recent years, everybody's realizing how important it is to have all this in place in the rare situation that it were to happen to you.
Right. Like you said, you hope it never does.
I hope.
But, well, and it's interesting for us as broadcasters. I mean, that's broadcasting over the last century, almost, has been built around this idea of being ready for emergency preparedness and being built to a certain standard so that if there is a crisis or there is an emergency, we're very scalable. I mean, anybody can watch us over the air from their house if they have a TV and they still have electricity, right? Which is the challenge. But if they have those two things, even if the cable goes out or you have some other crisis, you can still get the emergency information. So it's definitely one of those things that we're keenly aware of here. And when you talk about an area that has sometimes a lot of tornado activity and things like that, so we are always kind of keeping our eye on that here at KMOS, just with the thought of, if there's a disaster, we want to be prepared to be able to get the news out to folks if that's the case. So Cassie, you're working on all this stuff and you're trying to bring together all these different disparate parties. How do you get the word out besides being here today? I mean, if folks are interested in this, where would they see more? How would they find out more?
You can visit our website. It's www.kaysinger.com, and we'll have information on registration and also a link that you can go to pay for the registration as well. We're partnering with the cities and the chambers in each of our communities to reach out to all of the local business owners and members of the community to get the word out as well.
And if I have questions, can I call?
Yes. You can reach us at 660-885-3393, or feel free to reach me by email at csanders@kaysinger.com.
Great. So people can get their questions answered. Do I pay to register for this? What does it cost?
For a business owner, if you're not interested in an exhibitor's booth, it's going to be $35 for registration. That will include everything from the conference that day on the USB drive as well. If you're interested in a booth, it will be $75, and you'll receive 2 tickets for the day, so you can actually bring 2 employees for the $75.
Okay.
So you're saving a little bit of money and then also getting to market your business.
So now we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to go back to this question for you, Elizabeth. This is an interesting job, different kind of job. How does one become an employee at a regional planning commission? What's your background and how did you get involved in this?
It's very rare that somebody has a background in planning. You always kind of fall into the position through working with communities or something else, but I got my master's degree in community planning. So actually being the director of a regional planning commission was kind of my dream job. So it really worked out for me.
And that's something you say is not typical in most situations?
No, especially in our area,
Very rare.
Yeah, it's somebody falls into the position, somebody starts out as an administrative assistant and maybe moves up, and then you start specializing in a certain area of our organization, or sometimes somebody just applies and might have some business background or public speaking background, and you think that they're going to fit the position, and then you start sending them to training and everything so that they can get the experience they need to do the job.
And obviously a little piece of this at least is economic development too.
Yes.
So how do you leverage the other organizations in the community to help you do that part of the work?
We actually have 3 economic developers on staff. They're county-specific economic developers. So we have Bates County, St. Clair County, and Cedar County, and they'll work specifically with that county. That's actually where I started with Kaysinger. I was one of the economic developers before I got promoted. So in those 3 counties, and we're trying to get one for the entire region, if they need economic development, they go to that person, and then they're able to assist them with the business plans, or helping business get to that next step. And if they need resources, that's where they come to us.
So Cassie, let me pose the same question to you. How did you come to be a person who works for a regional planning commission?
I actually just applied for the job. They had an administrative assistant position open, and I don't know.
And so everything worked out?
Yes.
And now you're thrown into putting together a regional business conference.
Yes.
And how about you, Kristi? What's your background? How did you come to work for a regional planning commission?
Well, I got my bachelor's at UCM in finance, and my dream job was to work at a bank. So I was working at a bank, and it was a little bit too routine for me. And so I applied to Kaysinger, and I got the job. And my first role was working with the Solid Waste Management District, which manages recycling projects. There's so much funding available throughout the state for certain recycling projects, and I got to handle that. And I am kind of a tree hugger by heart, so I felt like I just found my dream job. And I've been here for 4 years now, and I've just recently got my master's in finance, because basically what I do is manage state and federal funding for these projects. So it's a perfect fit, and I love what I do because I love where I live. I grew up here, and I want to help these communities, especially when you see 10 or 20 or hundreds of jobs leave. You want to help those cities and counties to pick that back up and figure out where to go next.
Always a challenge. Even in a big city, it's a challenge to replace an employer. But when you only have 1 or 2 large employers in an area, even more important, right? So when you think about this regional planning commission, what do you see, Elizabeth, as sort of the biggest things that you would like to accomplish in the next 5 or 10 years? Are there things that are part of the master plan, or are you just so drawn in so many different directions that you can't really think that way?
Well, I have just been at this as director for 4 months, so.
Okay. You haven't figured out everything yet?
No, we do discuss a lot of a long-term planning for us. We need to create countywide plans to figure out what our needs are before we can really move forward. And I mentioned being proactive instead of reactive before, and they probably hear that way too much from me because I say it all the time. We need to try to be more proactive and know what the needs are instead of waiting for communities and counties to come to us. So I think 5 to 10 years down the road, that's kind of where I would like to be.
It seems too, as you guys are talking about this, many times when we think about these kind of projects, it's all about funding and how impossible it is to get funding. But I kind of feel like what I'm hearing you say is there is funding for a lot of this. It's just knowing how to apply for it and how to manage it. Is that accurate?
It's a lot of work. If it weren't a lot of work, cities would be able to do this themselves. There's a lot of, anytime you have state or federal funding, there's a lot of paperwork. And these cities and counties sometimes don't have time to do the things they need to do. So that's where we step in, and we've got experience in that, and we know kind of what the state is looking for in projects, and we don't pursue projects that won't fit, and we try to find other options. So another thing that I think is great about us is when you work with city and county leaders, those are ever-changing positions where we are not. We're always here, and we always have our expertise. So that means a lot for somebody who's stepping into being a new mayor or a new commissioner. So.
And at the same time, I mean, you guys ultimately are going to be working with those folks, and they change. And of course, I'm sure there are political situations like there are in every field that present particular challenges. So is that a tough thing to work through, Elizabeth, or do you find that typically it's pretty straightforward because they're coming to you really for help in most situations?
We try to keep a really good relationship with all of our communities. So when, if we do have a new commissioner come in, it's really, we try not to make a big deal out of it. So, we'll introduce ourselves to the new commissioner. Sometimes it's somebody we already know, sometimes it's somebody brand new. And we kind of get them involved from the beginning so they know, we're there for them and we're there to support them. And so it's unfortunately, it's just part of it's just part of the business. So we don't really think too much about it. You have people coming and going all the time.
So Cassie, we just have about a minute or so left. Let's talk one more time. If folks are interested in the conference, can you kind of just briefly the date and how to get information?
Yes, the conference will be held May 12th of 2016 at the Benson Center in Clinton, Missouri. If you want more information, you can visit our website at www.kaysinger.com. You can also reach me by phone at 660-885-3393 or by email at csanders@kaysinger.com.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your help. And that's it for this episode of Pause. I'm your host, Dr. Phil Hoffman, and we will see you right here next time. Thanks for joining us.